The next video goes over another example Python program. This one has kind of a strange purpose to it. So by just looking at the code that you're given, it's like completely nonsensical. There's no reason that a rational human being would write this program. But by tracing through this program, it really forces you to think about how the computer interprets instructions, because you can't just rely on your own logic about what makes sense in a particular problem situation. So we're going to look at this example code. I put it in Python, and the Python code's also available on the original assignment page. And then we're going to try to answer these questions. The first question is it possible for the words cheddar, Gouda, and Swiss to all be printed during the program's execution? And if it is, what value would make that happen? If it's not possible, explain why. So our first step is to figure out where are all those values printed. So the cheddar option is here in this if statement. The Gouda option is in this else if, and then the Swiss option is in this else if. And because those are all grouped together as part of a single conditional statement, it's impossible for all of those individual statements to be printed together, because the computer will either pick the first one, or it'll pick the second one, or it'll pick the third one. It always picks the first condition that's true and then executes the statement associated with that. So it's not possible to have all of those input values or all of those output values selected, because Python will only execute the first condition that is true. So then it asks us to design a test, a value of A, B, and C that would make exactly the following print to the screen. So we want to print the value start, and then it's a late parrot, and then finally done. So we're going to print start. That always happens regardless of what value the individual inputs have. So that's easy. And then it's a late parrot. That only prints if A is bigger than B and B is not bigger than C. So far I know I need A bigger than B, and I need B less than or equal to C. Because that has to be true in order for this else to happen. The if has to happen if A is bigger than B. And then if B were bigger than C, it would print spam please, not it's a late parrot. So we need a B that's less than or equal to C for this else part to execute. And then we don't want it to do either of the other ones, and it won't, because this first condition was true, A was greater than B. It'll skip the other two and then print done. So we can pick any three values where these conditions that we identified are met. So we need A bigger than B, so we can have A is 10, B is 5, and then B has to be less than or equal to C, so let's make C equal to 20. That would be just fine. And if we run the program with those three input values, then we should get that result that we were expecting. Let's try it out. You can always test it. So if we put in 10 for A and 5 for B and 20 for C, we do get the output that we were going for start, it's a late parrot, and done. The next question asks us to design a test case that would make exactly the following happen. We want it to print start. Remember, that always happens, so that's easy. And then we want it to print cheese shop and then Gouda. So in this case, we don't want to execute this first if statement. We want A to be less than or equal to B. That will make the first statement false, so that it'll drop down and evaluate this if statement. Then we want the second if statement to be true, so that it'll print cheese shop. So we need B to be greater than or equal to C. And then we want a Gouda to print. That means that A can't be bigger than C, and also that A has to be less than B. Well, we already know A is less than or equal to B, so we just have to make sure it's not equal, and that'll handle that case. And we need A to be less than or we need A to be less than C to make this first part false. A is less than C. So now we just have to pick 3 values that will make that true. So I'm going to pick A is equal to 10. And then B has to be bigger than A. So I'm going to make that 20. B has to be bigger than C. So C just has to be less than 20. And then A has to be less than C. So I'm going to make A 15. That way C will be less than B, but C will be bigger than A. And again, let me test that out to make sure that I picked the right values that would make sense. When you were doing the homework assignment, you picked something out else that's completely fine, as long as you got the expected output. And we see that the expected output is what we were going for, so that's good. Next up, it asks us to design a test case so that it prints trees and then larch. It doesn't say that it's going to print the start value, but it absolutely has to do that because that's part of the program, not part of the conditional statement. So it's going to print start, and then we want it to print trees and larch. So to make it print trees, we have to have this first if and this second else if both be false. So that means that A has to be less than or equal to B, and B has to be less than or equal to C. That will make both of those first conditions false. That'll cause it to come down here and print the trees with the else. And then we don't want A to be equal to B. We want them to be different so that it'll print larch. So A is not equal to B. All right, so then we can pick any values that make that true. I'm going to pick A is 10, B is 20, and C is 30. I think those are going to be good values and cause the output that I'm going for. Let's test it out. So it prints start, trees, larch, done, and that's perfect. As written, it's impossible for both the phrases spam please and cheddar to print out. See, spam please prints up here and cheddar prints down here. What small change to the program would make it possible to have both those phrases included in the output for some test cases? Well, the reason that we can't have both of those outputted is because the spam please is part of this if, and the cheddar is part of this else if. And so this part will only execute if the first if condition is false. So if we wanted the possibility of both of them executing, then we would have to change this else if to just if. And then it's completely possible for us to be able to find a value, have to like think through what would make it true, that would make it print the spam please, but also make it print cheddar. We need to change the elif to an if. And then how many different combinations of output strings can the silly program generate? That's controlled by the values of A, B, and C. So how many different possible ways can these be related to each other? So let's think through that. So one thing that can happen is A can be bigger than B. And if that's true, it could print out spam please. A bigger than B. It'll print spam please. So that's one possibility. We could also have A bigger than B and B less than or equal to C. That'll make it print it's a late parrot. We could also have the case where A is less than or equal to B and B is greater than C. In that case, it will print the cheese shop. And then we also have to think through possible values here. We could have a case where A is greater than or equal to C. and it would also print cheddar in that case. It also have the A is less than or equal to B, and B is greater than C, and A is less than B. That would print cheese shop Gouda. Also, A is less than or equal to B, and B is greater than C, and B is equal to C. In that case, it would print cheese shop Swiss. Let's think about that. Can that really happen? If A is less than B and B is greater than C, can B be equal to C? That's like impossible. So that is never going to happen. So that's not one of the possible outputs. I told you this program was weird. Some final cases, we could have A be less than or equal to B, and B be less than or equal to C, and that would cause it to print trees. If A is equal to B, it would print trees and then chestnut. If A is less than or equal to B, and B is less than or equal to C, and A is not equal to B, it would print trees large. Let's think about whether those can happen. If A is less than B and B is less than or equal to C, A can be equal to B. They could all be the same value. It would print chestnut. But it's also possible for A to be less than B, B to be less than C, and A to not be equal to B. In that case, it would print trees large. So I think that's all the possible combinations of values that could print out. We thought through whether all of these were possible. Let's just real quick think through whether the others are possible. Can A be less than B and B be greater than C and A be less than B? That's definitely possible. And then can A be less than B, B be greater than C, and A be greater than C? Yes, that's possible. So I think that's all the cases. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 possible cases of output that this program could have.